name is Gooijer. I work as an agronomist at Borgo Industries in St. Bruce, Saskatchewan, Canada. My role here is to do testing between the equipment and the plant development. And there's a lot of interaction that happens between what we're doing on the equipment side and as far as how it's moving the soil, where the fertility is placed, on the development of the crop itself and how it can access nutrients. So bringing the agronomy world into the equipment into the agronomy, everyday producers are always dealing with this, and we wanted to break it down a little bit to give some more in-depth, analysis of how these interactions are affecting their crop and how changing the equipment and the placement of fertilizer will affect the crop. So that's a quick rundown on what the agronomy program here at Borgo is aiming to do. We have about 2,000 acres, so we're just basically a commercial farm that we run these trials in. So they're 30 feet wide by 400 feet long, and we replicate everything 3 times. And so we do this with sort of specialized equipment, but 30-foot wide drills, and we have a leading cart that we can just plug one drill in and then plug another one in that has a different kind of a configuration on it. So what I wanted to do today was go over some of the trials that we just put in on our wheat. We have about 100 and some strips into 1 quarter of land here, and I thought it'd be neat just to give a quick example of some of the trials that we're doing, but also a little bit of discussion on why we're doing it too. So, got a whiteboard behind me here. I thought I'd just draw out some of the different configurations that we do have. So our typical Borgo drill is been based around a single knife opener with mid-row banders. So it looks like this. We have our seed, and then about either 5 inches away or 10 inches away, depending on how wide your openers are, we'll have a mid-row bander. And another seed, then mid-row bander, seed. So one mid-row bander supplies 2 seed runs, so we only have half as many banders. So typical placement is the nitrogen usually goes down into the mid-row bander. We have our wheat seed here. I'll just draw a little plant to replicate that. And we have our phos and potash going here. So as far as any trials that we have with this particular setup, there's a couple different things that we are playing with for this upcoming year. So this is our PK blend. I'll just write that, PK blend, and urea. And we have it set up this way as kind of our, almost like a control, kind of traditional. We are also just looking at how these 2 things, when we separate these 2 things out, so the phos and the potash, how they affect development. So we have another one here, seed, mid-row, seed. We'll have our nitrogen down here, and then we only would put in phos as the P. Or we'll have another one where we come down and we're only putting in K, so only potash there. We have another one here, we're actually moving this K, this potash, and we're not putting it in the seed row, we're actually going to put it out into the mid row and see how that affects the crop and that early uptake of potash versus having it in the, a little bit further away. There's lots of nitrogen around, it really gets taken up later on in the season. We have this setup, and then of course we just have a total control where we have nothing, no PK going down, just nitrogen. And so then we get to separate how phos, potash, and potash placements here, how they affect that crop development. So we have all this on 10-inch spacing, but we also have it where we have it versus 12-inch spacing. So spacing in cereals is kind of been known, been shown in the research where the narrower we can get, if you have moisture, typically you have a higher yield potential. So we offer 10 and 12 inch spacing on a hoe type drill. And we just want to see when guys go to purchase, you know, and they're asking, well, what do we do, right? There's a lot of cost to 10 inch. We're just looking at what the yield potential differences are between 10 and 12. So this is going to go fairly quick just to give a quick examples of different things that we're doing. So now we have another drill that's set up with our dual knife system. So a dual knife system, right, is going to be your fertilizer going down, and then you'll have kind of the seed goes up like this. So there's a lot of these on the market. We just kind of brought in our own one that's very similar to a lot on the market. It's just a dual knife. So we'll have, actually the fertilizer knife will go through first, and then the seed knife comes through after and drops down the seed. So in this case, we'll have the nitrogen being placed in the sideband. And then we'll also put in, then we'll start bringing in, and I'll put the seed here, then we'll start bringing in the potash and the K. So we have our, basically an NPK blend and nothing going with the seed. So alternatively, we'll do another trial where we have the nitrogen down in the sideband. We'll have the seed up here, and then we'll bring that PK into with the seed. Previously, what we saw in the past is when we do that, we typically see a bit more up, kind of get up and go from the wheat crop when we bring that PK into the seed place in this style. And that has a lot to do with this nitrogen being in the sideband. And when nitrogen is converting, and I should say specifically urea, is converting, there's a lot of things happening in the band. pH levels are going up, there's free ammonia. Doesn't really make a nice conducive growing conditions for roots. So a lot of times what we'll see, and this has been shown in some other research as well, basically you have a bunch of nitrogen and it likes to move out. It can move in the soil, right? But then if you bring in and you have potash in there, what can happen, especially in maybe some drier conditions, you don't have moisture to really get this nitrogen moving out. A lot of time there's our wheat plant, soil line, the roots trying to grow in, just kind of fizzle off and can't physically get to that PK for uptake, simply because the nitrogen is kind of creating not a great condition for the roots to grow into. And P and K isn't mobile in the soil very far, so it stays there. So this nitrogen, as it starts to dissipate out, you start to see it breaking down, right? And it starts taken up by the root, and then the root can kind of get back into uptaking the P and K. That's where, if we have this system here, or this placement, we typically start to see a little bit more of a pop-up when we have the PK in the seed row with nitrogen in the sideband. So that's another trial that we have this year out there. I'm gonna bring this one back though. So there's our sideband opener. So what's really cool about what we are offering this year in the Trimax system, we've done a lot of tests on this, is we use this opener, but then we bring in the mid-row bander into this system as well. So now we have 3 different placements for the seed, starter fertilizer, and the nitrogen. So we've got trials in this case where we'll have seed is always up here. We'll put the P and K here. So PK will be there, and then we'll put our nitrogen out onto the side. So this is the N out here. Okay, so this is kind of what I have been finding is almost like an ideal scenario, this triple shoot where there's nothing really competing with the seed for moisture, for germination. So roots get to get going, right? And then take up some phos, gets a pop up. There's no bunch of nitrogen all around there. It just can take up phos. The roots keep growing down, growing out. Meanwhile, the nitrogen's over here doing its thing, converting. It starts moving down, moving over. Eventually what happens is these two will start to meet, right? The roots don't physically have to penetrate into where the nitrogen actually went into, where it was placed in the soil, I should say, because we know this band. It's been shown lots where, we can measure as it starts to move down, right? So the roots in this case are typically about that kind of five inches, so 5-6 inches long, and then they start to take up. So usually the wheat crop is kind of around that 2, 3, 4 leaf, and it starts to just start picking up some nitrogen, and as it gets into elongation, it's basically tapped right into all that nitrogen there as it's kind of starting to move down. So this is kind of an ideal situation when you look at some of the literature, but we wanted to play with some other options with how this is all placed. So what we ended up doing was, we'll get that sideband opener again. Okay, there's bander. We actually would move the nitrogen here. Let's say if we had 4 prills over here, 100 pounds, well, we're actually putting down 140 pounds. We're gonna move 30 pounds of this over into the sideband here as well. So we're gonna see what happens if we don't move all the nitrogen here, so we don't get that kind of that hot banding effect, but we have some for some uptake. We have the wheat here. So it'll take in, get the phos, a little bit of nitrogen, keep doing its thing, right, and keep moving along. So we have that set up as well. Another two we have, I should say. That'll be interesting this year. So we have those ones out there with the nitrogen out in the mid-row. Well, another application of fertilizer that a person can do is broadcast, right? So we actually went out, broadcast on the ground, right? We just use a spreader, we spread it out there, and then we came in with this dual knife system. So what's cool about that is you can still put your PK here, and you have your wheat going down there. Nitrogen now is on the ground, so it's been pretty dry lately, but there's been when the roots are growing in, they can go take up that PK, and then as this nitrogen hopefully starts to rain here soon, moves down into the soil, then the roots can start to take it up as well. But basically it gets away from having that hot banding effect there around the PK. The problem with this scenario can be sometimes is if you don't get that rain to push nitrogen down, it doesn't work very well. So we'll see, we have this trial out there, but another one we have, another product, is with ESN and a slow release. So we have the sideband again, and basically all these things are trying to do is just allow that crop to have access to PK earlier. So we have the nitrogen around here again, we have the PK in here. Well, instead of moving this nitrogen out, either in the mid-row or broadcasting it on top, what we wanted to do is say, okay, we still like this placement. Okay, let's say we like that, but can we use this ESN fertilizer, which is a slower release fertilizer? And the theory here is that it doesn't release right away, which means that this root won't run into maybe as toxic effects and can actually get in there, get some PK before this band starts to get too hot. So the amount that we put in was about 30% ESN. So about 100 pounds, we have about 100 pounds of urea, which is still quite a bit. And we have about 30 pounds of ESN. and another 10 comes just from the phosphorus. So the goal there is that slow release on the seed root safety, I guess you'd call it, so they can get in there, take up that PK, and then, you know, as the ESN starts to release, it doesn't, you know, we'll have more nitrogen for the plant growing a little bit later as well. So now, those are kind of our placements. I sum it up here quick. Didn't think you'd probably going to have some guy write on a whiteboard at you here, but so our 2021 wheat trials, we basically have the nitrogen placement. Just under nitrogen alone, we either have it in the sideband, mid-row, broadcast, and then we also added in the slow release, we'll call it. So that's just on the nitrogen side, and we're doing the same thing in the canola as well. But on the wheat, this is what we have in the ground right now. We're just kind of waiting on some weather at this particular moment to get the canola going in. But it should be really interesting when it comes to the results and seeing how the crop development is. And that's really what I wanted to show today on what we're doing out there in the trial. So, you know, there's a couple probably placements of nitrogen, let's say anhydrous or banding in the fall or banding in the spring, you know, that we're not testing yet, but could potentially be something. But this covers a pretty good chunk of how nitrogen can get kind of moved around and placed and put into the ground or used by the plant, I should say, too, on the different placements here. So I wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you reach out and we can talk some more agronomy when it comes as it deals to seed and fertilizer placement and equipment in general. So thanks again for watching.
I thought I was dying right then. I was just thinking I was getting zapped any second. Dad always told me put the auger down right away. Don't drive anywhere from that bin yard because there's a power line right beside it, and just in a rush went through my head and backed into it. And when I looked out the back window, there was sparks coming off the auger tires onto the ground, and there was flames right away. And I didn't even have to look up to see the power line. I knew I had hit it right away. I saw the sparks coming off the tire. I've never been so scared in my life. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there for probably 3 seconds, didn't move. I had to gather my thoughts, and it was not a good feeling. My first thought was, you idiots, you just killed yourself here with the power line, and then lots of embarrassment. Why did you make this stupid mistake? Like, you almost costed yourself your own life. Definitely look at safety a lot more since this incident. You always think, oh, it won't happen to me. All it takes is 30 seconds. Hitting a power line can happen to anybody. Like, I was 16 when I did it, and yeah, I was a young kid at that time and still am, but just because you're 50 doesn't mean you can't hit it. Farmers, when you can work during the busy season, you go hard, but you have to slow down for half a minute sometimes and just think about what you're doing and what the risks are, and just, you have to make sure what you're doing is safe, because if you don't, you end up making those stupid little mistakes that could be the end of it for you.